while we're waiting for the lye and the oil to finish up, we're going to do our last step in preparation before we mix, and that's getting our goat milk ready. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of time. You could do this step earlier in the process, like we did measuring the fragrance oil and the oats, or you can do all of that while you're waiting for your lye and oil to get ready. But I think if you're brand new to making soap, doing it this way is just a little less stressful, because then you're not worrying about what all you need to be doing. Okay, we need 6 ounces of water. We're going to reconstitute our goat's milk here. And I'm going to use 10 tablespoons. 3. I want to get all that goodness of the goat's milk in this soap. Okay, good. Great. Okay, we're all ready now to add our lye water to the oil and get our soap made. So the first thing I'm going to do is stick my stick blender in here. I like to use the stick blender instead of doing it all by hand, because especially with vegetable oil soap, make sure that there's no air bubbles in there, it brings a trace much faster. You could be stirring a long time and it just makes things so much faster. I don't usually lift my stick blender out too much while I'm doing this, because I don't want to incorporate any extra air bubbles into my soap. So once we get started, I'll be slowly pouring in the lye. I'll continue stirring until we get to a light trace, and then I'll show you what that looks like. And once we get to light trace, then that's when I'll be incorporating our other ingredients. I'll be incorporating first the oats, because I want to make sure they're evenly dispersed in the whole soap. Then I will incorporate the milk and the fragrance. And before we actually get going, I did tell you that quite often I add just a little bit of the oil that we have here to our fragrance as a base. Just kind of helps that incorporate into the soap a little easier. So this is a couple ounces. 4 tablespoons is 2 ounces. Incorporate that. Now that's all ready to go. Also gently warms it. It's at room temperature, but our ingredients here are higher than room temperature. Now don't use plastic to do this. Use a metal spoon to do this, because that fragrance oil will eat plastic. And the last stick blender I had, when I was pouring the fragrance oil in, actually hit part of the blender as I was pouring it in, and it made this mark on it. So always make sure you're using glass or Corelware stainless steel when you're working with your fragrance oil. And one last little tip: if you'd like to have a really smooth oatmeal soap, this Nature's Goodness oatmeal is a baby cereal. This is a great substitute. Now I find that I like having just a little bit more texture, but this is not super scrubby in my oatmeal, and that's what my customers prefer. But I do use this in some of my other soaps. So this is a great alternative if you'd like to have something that's even more smooth and creamy. And I use this particular brand because it doesn't have anything extra in it, like soy stuff. It's really pretty much just the oat flour. Okay, so here we go. And make sure you're wearing protective gloves and glasses. I know you can become comfortable with not doing so if you've made soap a long time. But it's so important to be safe. We only have 2 eyes and the skin we were born with, so I found after making as much soap as I have, and not being as careful as sometimes I should be, that I've grown quite sensitive to that lye solution. And even just the fumes from that lye make my skin irritated now. Okay, it's starting to thicken up a little bit, but it's not fully incorporated. I'm going to check and see how we're doing here. And I like to be able to have the light reflecting, especially like the sunlight or the room lamp light on what I'm doing, because I can see as I'm dripping here like this that I'm getting to a really light trace, because you can kind of see the trail of the drip. I don't really think I'm as close as I want to be before I add my fragrance, but I am going to add my oats now. And I don't want to incorporate a lot of air, so I'm just going to do this without turning on the stick blender at first. Get them moist. Okay. There's still a couple of big globs. There we go. Break those up a little bit. I'm going to make sure it's really incorporated well. Some fragrances, when you add them, are going to do crazy things to your soap. And it's helpful if you buy your supplies from someone reputable who tells you what their fragrances will do in cold processed soap, because cold processed soap and working with lye can do a lot of funky things with fragrances. Now I'm going to check and see where I'm at. I'm getting to a nice light trace here. I can see some trails in my soap, but I still like to get it just a little bit further than that before I add my oil. Now you can see that it only takes a few minutes to really get things going with the soap, and even when I make the bigger batch, which is twice this size, it incorporates in about the same amount of time. That's how the oatmeal is really in there nice. Now I really want you to be right over my shoulder here, because I'm looking at my soap and I'm looking at the reflection of the light right above me. And you always have to stir without the stick blender on a little bit to see where you're at, because you have to make sure it's all incorporated. You don't want to get what they call a false trace, which can happen if you're just using the stick blender and then lift it up right away. But I'm starting to see trails just from my stirring. And if I lift it along here, you can see all those little trails and drip marks. So that means that we're at a trace. And we're ready to add our final ingredients. Now this is where we add the milk and the oil. Now you have to remember that milk and lye do funny things together. So I'm going to just get all of this incorporated in there quickly, and I'm going to pour it in the mold. fact, I'm only going to stir by hand here at first. Some fragrance oils really set up fast. This one does not. You have some time to work with it, but you really want to make sure it's incorporated before you pour the whole thing into the mold. Now you can see it's really starting to thicken up faster here. Now it's getting nice and thick like a pudding. It's kind of a runny pudding right now. I just want to make sure everything's really incorporated. Now, even a beginner can make this recipe, because the only difference between making this goat's milk soap recipe and a basic recipe is this very end where we added these last couple of ingredients, where we added the milk and where we added the oatmeal. That's really the only difference, because most basic recipes are going to include a fragrance. Now I'm going to just scooch over here and grab my spatula. Got a little bit of oil on it, so I'm just wiping it clean, and we're going to pour our soap into the mold. So exciting, I love this part. Sometimes with soaps, this is the part where I'll take a little bit out and put a color in, and we'll swirl it, or maybe if there's any other cool things we're going to add, any extra ingredients we're going to add to it, this is the spot where we do that. Soap making is so much fun because you can be so creative. That's what I love about making soap. I love designing new soaps. And I love making my soaps look unique and not like other people's soaps. So I'm always trying to think of ways that I can make my soaps special. There's lots of people out there who make soap. You want yours to stand out, and you want people to want your soap. You want your soap to sell itself. With all of the retail establishments that have bought my soap, I've never done any marketing for that. Someone's always tried my soap, and I've had places call me. I've had many places call me to be able to sell my soap, ask if I sell it wholesale. I didn't start out trying to do that. I was just having fun. But if you make your soaps with great ingredients, the best quality ingredients you can find, and you make them unique, then people are going to want them. This is the extra special touch of my soap recipe. This is what makes my soap different from everyone else. Everyone loves this soap and how it looks. I take the whole oats and sprinkle them on top. I don't put too thick of a layer here to start because I'm going to kind of pat them in a little bit. Some of these oats are going to really incorporate into maybe the first top quarter or half inch of the bar of soap. I'm going to just set that there. A little more. And we'll pat this down and in. And once I get this all incorporated, I'm just going to top it off with a little bit of extra oats. And whatever soap is kind of sticking up on top of these oats, then some of the extra oats I sprinkle on are going to incorporate. But it's okay if they don't all. When we cut our soap, we'll just let the stuff that didn't attach, it'll come right off, and that's okay. Can't really make a mistake here. There's no right or wrong. How much? You can kind of see I just put a few handfuls on there and smear it around a little bit. Now my customers love this aspect of the soap because they don't want a really abrasive bar of soap, but this one end, when you get it all cut, is going to have the scrubbiness to it that they love, and they'll take that end of the bar to flake off all that dead yucky skin on their heels of their feet and their elbows and all the other places on their body that get dead dry skin. So there we go. Our soap is all ready. Now we're going to cover this up. To insulate the soap, I'm just going to throw a piece of wax paper. You could use saran wrap, anything basically. I just don't want to get my book dirty. And I'm putting a book over the top. That's how I've always done it. I always use things that are on hand. And I'm going to wrap up my soap and insulate it so it can heat up.